All right. So what I'm going to do in this presentation is I'm going to tell you about some of the objects, well, in fact, all of the objects, which you will look at for the assignment Show and Tell Hellenism. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a short explanation, een korte uitleg, about the 6 objects. And I'm going to tell you how you can do some research, de belangrijke woorden voor jouw onderzoek, which you can use for Google. Okay? Now, the first object we're going to talk to is a ring of someone called Ptolemy VI Philometor. It's from about 170 BC. Now, let me tell you who this guy is. He is the great-great-great-grandson of one of the generals of Alexander the Great. Now, you remember, after Alexander the Great died, his empire was split, it is verdeeld, into 3 or 4 big states ruled by his old generals. Now, in Egypt, one of his generals, called Ptolemy, became the king. He actually became the pharaoh. And this guy we're looking at here is the great-great-great-great-great-grandson of this guy here, Ptolemy. Now, let me explain some things about the object. You can see in the object, this guy is wearing something on his head. Well, let's talk about what that actually is. This is called the double crown of Egypt, or the Peshent. So, since 3100 before Christ, that is bijna 5000 jaar geleden, Egyptian pharaohs were actually the king of 2 lands. They were the kings of Upper Egypt, which was here, and Lower Egypt, that was here. And there was a crown for upper and there was a crown for lower. And if you combine them into one crown, you get what is called the double crown, called the Peshent. And this is what you can see on this guy's head. Now, I want you to have a look here. This is King Ptolemy. Remember, he's a Greek guy. And these are Egyptian pharaohs from before the conquests of Alexander. Dus voor de tijd van de verovering van Alexander. Can you see any differences? Well, you should firstly see that this guy does not have this kind of beard thing here which Egyptian pharaohs had before. You can also see that his face is very different from these pharaohs. This is a realistic face. If you saw this face today, well, I know who that guy is. These are not. You would not be able to see this person on the street and say, oh, look, that's the pharaoh. Now, have a look at these. These are some statues, standbeelden uit Griekenland. What can you see which is similar between them? First thing mainly is you can see that these guys all have beards. Now, a lot of Greek statues, heel veel van Grieke standbeelden, niet allemaal, they had beards. Some didn't. But the other thing you can see from these statues is they're very realistic. You can see the face, you can see who these people were, and you can see here a very realistic looking face as well. So, why do you think this is a good example of Hellenism? How does it combine Greek and Egyptian culture? The key words here, which you can look for on Google, are Peshent, Ptolemy VI Philometor, Pharaoh, Greek statues, and Egyptian statues. Right. The next thing, object number 2, a coin of Demetrius the Invincible of Bactria. This is from about 200 to 180 BC. What you can see a guy, and he's got a kind of elephant on his head. This is a muntgeld, and on the other side you've got this. You've got some Greek writing, and you've got this dude here. Right, so let me talk about this a little bit. Talked about the Hellenistic successor states, and we talked just now about Ptolemy. Well, there was another much bigger empire which was a general of Alexander's called Seleucus. And he became the king of this big empire here. Now, because it was so big, there were lands within the empire. Dat zijn klein landen binnen de keizerrijk. And one of these you can see here is called Bactria. Now, this particular state here, Bactria, actually became independent, onafhankelijk, around 250 BC, dus 250 voor Christus. And it's basically where Afghanistan is today. Now, this was a very rich area. It was superrijk, omdat het staat op heel veel handelsrouten. So there were lots of trade in this particular area. Now, Demetrius here, he was the second king, the tweede koning of Bactria. And he fought lots of wars. He fought wars against the Greeks, but he also fought wars against people and kings in India. I want to tell you a little bit about India. In India, elephants, olifanta, they were used in war. You can see these here, these war elephants here. You can see them also there. These are all from the time about 200 years before Christ. And also, they were very symbolic of kings. So, if you were in Egypt, you had the crown, the pashent. In India, elephants were very important to show that you were the king. The next thing you have to look at here. I'm showing you here two standbeelden of Alexander the Great. Now, he is a big symbol of power. This is the guy who conquered. Hij heeft de hele wereld veroverd. He conquered the whole world. Very important, you can see Alexander, unlike a lot of Greek statues, had no beard, geen baard. Let's go back to this coin here. Here's Demetrius. Look at this here. No beard. You can see he's got an elephant on his head. But who is this guy here, do you think, with the club? So why do you think this is a good example of Hellenism? How does it combine Greek and Indian culture? And your keywords: Bactria, Hellenism, Demetrius I, war elephants, India. Let's go on to the third object now. This is a statue, an andere standbeeld, and it is a statue of Zeus Ammon. It comes from about 150 BC from Alexandria in Egypt. Now, as you can see, this is made up of two things, Zeus and Ammon. So let's start with the Ammon part. Well, Ammon was a very powerful, a very important Egyptian god, and god uit Oud-Egypte. He was the god of the sun, and the lucht, and he was one of the most powerful gods. And you can see here, he has these horns on his head. These were kind of symbolisch van macht, a symbol of power. Now let's talk about Zeus. We've talked about the Ammon. Well, Zeus, we know, he's the king, the koning of the Greek gods. He's usually shown with a big beard and with lightning. So you've got Zeus, you've got Ammon. Now I'm going to tell you here about an oasis. So in the middle of some deserts, in the middle of and woestijn, you can sometimes have green areas. These are called oases. And there was an oasis here in Egypt where some Greeks and Egyptians, they invented a new god called Zeus Ammon. And they built a temple here. So een belangrijke tempel voor dit nieuwe god. And people believed that if you went and you talked to the god, he could tell you the future. Kan de toekomst vertellen. And there is a story that Alexander the Great crossed the desert and he went to ask Zeus Ammon, will I be a god? Bit of a weird thing to ask, but you know, he was Alexander the Great, so fine. So, those are all the clues. You've got the statue of Zeus Ammon. Why do you think this is a good example of Hellenism? How does it combine Greek and Egyptian culture? Your keywords: Zeus, Ammon, Siwa Oasis, Alexander the Great. Next one. These are very similar ones here, so I don't have to do such a big explanation for this next one, but it's another coin, een klein muntgeld, and it's from about 200 BC, dus 200 voor Christus. And what you can see here is you've got a coin of Alexander the Great. So we've got Alexander the Great, obviously no beard. And you can see he here has the horns of the god Ammon on his head. On the other side of the coin, you've got the Greek goddess of victory, dus the godin van overwinning, called Nike. And you've got some Greek writing here. So again, why is this a good example of Hellenism? How does it combine Greek and Egyptian culture? Your keywords: Ammon, Siwa Oasis, Alexander the Great. Right, the next one is an object. But it's not necessarily an object. This is actually a town. It was a town called Alexandria Bucephalus, and it was founded by Alexander the Great. So he was the guy who said to somebody, build this town. Je moet dit stad hier bouwen, jongen. And what you can see here, you've got two things here. This is from a map, a medieval map from about 500 after Christ. So this town lasted for a long time. It was 500 AD. And these are the ruins of Alexander at Bucephalus, which are in modern-day Pakistan. So we talked about last time how Alexander started many towns called Alexandria after him, all over the world. Now, Alexandria, Bucephalus is here. As we know before, this is what is now modern Pakistan. Now, the town itself is called after Alexander's favourite horse from Greece. There was a horse called Bucephalus, and he's probably the most famous horse in history. There are statues of this horse, there are paintings of this horse, and the first people to live in the town were soldiers from Greece and soldiers from what is now Iran, or Persia as it was then called. And the town was built with Greek architecture, but also local architecture, so Indian architecture. So why is this a good example of Hellenism? How does it combine Greek and Iranian, so Persian culture? Your keywords: towns founded by Alexandria, Bucephalus, Alexandria, Bucephalus. Next and last, we have the statue of Mithridates VI, the king of Pontus. Now, this comes from about 100 BC. And to give a little bit of background here, Pontus, it is here in what is now Turkey, in North Turkey. So definitely not Greek. It was very, very different. And this is here in dark purple, in the Donkerpaars. Now, Mithridates VI, he's from North Turkey. And his ancestors, his foreouders, included kings of Persia and two generals of Alexander the Great, who became kings of successor states. So this guy has got Persian foreouders and he's got Greek foreouders. Now, when he was alive, he was very successful and he conquered, veroverd, a huge empire, firstly in Turkey, but also here around the Black Sea. This all became part of his big Keizerrijk. Now, other thing you need to know, Hercules. Maybe you know the legend of the fable, or I'm not sure what we even call that, the sprookje of Hercules. He was given 12 tasks, 12 opdrachten, which he had to do. And one of the 12 tasks that he had to do was to kill a very dangerous lion, a supergevaarlijk leeuw, called the Nemean lion. And when he did kill the lion, he took off the skin of the lion and then he wore it as a cloak. So, why does a Persian Greek king have a lion on his head? Why is this a good example of Hellenism? Your keywords: Pontus, Mithridates VI, 12 tasks of Hercules, the Nemean lion. That's the end of the slideshow. Any questions, ask your teacher.